The message arrived in the middle of a shift. After careful review of your account, certain documents or information you submitted to Uber appear to be altered and/or fraudulent. As a result, your account has been deactivated. He had been driving for Uber for over 3 years. Every document he had ever submitted was real: his license, his insurance, his vehicle inspection. He hadn't altered anything. He didn't know which document was supposedly fraudulent, because the message didn't say. He called Uber support. The representative couldn't figure out the reason for the deactivation. She couldn't tell him which document was the problem. She suggested he appeal. He appealed. He called every day. He got different answers each time. Nobody at Uber, he later wrote in a detailed account posted online, could explain why the system had flagged him. The account stayed deactivated. His income went to zero. That night. This is not one story. It is thousands of them. Uber operates in more than 70 countries and facilitates over 5 billion rides per year. Its platform connects drivers to passengers through an app, a phone-based interface that tracks location, records ride data, processes payments, and manages the entire relationship between the company and its workforce. That workforce is classified as independent contractors. This distinction matters enormously. Independent contractors are not entitled to minimum wage, benefits, sick pay, or unemployment insurance. They cannot form a union under U.S. labor law in the same way employees can. They have no HR department to file a grievance with. The only relationship they have with Uber is through the app, and through the automated systems that run it. Among those systems is the one that decides whether a driver stays on the platform. Uber has never publicly disclosed the specifics of how its fraud detection and safety monitoring systems work. What is known, from driver testimony and investigative reporting, is that the system evaluates accounts continuously, monitoring ratings, complaint patterns, document submissions, GPS data, and dozens of other signals. When the system identifies something it classifies as anomalous, it flags the account. When a flag reaches a certain threshold, the account is deactivated. This can happen without a human reviewing the specific case. The driver receives a notification. The account is off. The problems with this system are structural, and they have been documented repeatedly. Passengers have learned that filing a complaint, even a false one, often results in a fair refund from Uber. Some passengers abuse this. They file complaints about dangerous driving, about impairment, about behavior that never occurred. Uber's system is designed to prioritize passenger safety, which in practice means the complaint is taken seriously and the driver's account is flagged. In 2020, CNET documented the problem of Uber deactivating drivers over false DUI complaints from passengers. By 2022, investigative reporting found the same pattern still operating. Drivers with perfect ratings, 4.98 stars, 10,000 rides, 0 prior incidents, were receiving deactivation notices based on a single complaint from a passenger they couldn't identify, for behavior they hadn't engaged in. The fraud detection system created its own category of errors. Drivers who submitted legitimate documents, insurance renewals, vehicle inspections, license updates, sometimes found those documents flagged as fraudulent by an automated review process. The system had identified a pattern it associated with fraud. It was wrong. But the driver had no way to demonstrate this, because Uber wouldn't tell them which document was the issue or what pattern had triggered the alert. The appeals process existed. Drivers who navigated it sometimes succeeded. But the process was not designed for the person on the other side of it. Support agents often didn't have access to the data that had triggered the deactivation. They could see that an account was deactivated. They often could not see why. This created a specific kind of trap. The driver needed to explain the error in order to appeal it. But the error was in a system the driver couldn't see. They were being asked to defend themselves against a charge they didn't know, using evidence they didn't have access to, in a process run by agents who didn't have the information either. What makes these stories particularly sharp is the gap between what drivers risk and what Uber risks. When Uber deactivates a driver, the driver loses their income. For drivers who depend on Uber as their primary source of earnings, this is an immediate financial crisis. There is no severance. There is no unemployment insurance for independent contractors. There is no guaranteed timeline for resolution. When Uber deactivates a driver incorrectly, the cost to Uber is small. The rides that driver would have taken get redistributed to other drivers, who absorb the work without comment. The platform continues operating. The algorithm doesn't register its own error as a problem. In 2022, a driver in St. Louis, described as the top paid driver in the city, with a 4.98 star rating and a 99% acceptance rate, was deactivated after a passenger complaint. He was not driving impaired. He had a dashcam. Uber told him they would not reactivate his account. I tried to tell them that I was not on anything or even tired at the time, he wrote online. Really wasn't. Uber did not provide an explanation for how the complaint was evaluated. They did not say what evidence, if any, had been reviewed. The account remained deactivated. This is not a single decision by a human being who can be questioned, challenged, or held responsible. It is a system output. The system produced a result. The result was final until some other process, an appeal, a media inquiry, a legal filing, produced a countervailing force. Most drivers didn't have those resources. One driver described calling Uber support every day for a week, getting a different explanation each time, running in circles until the process exhausted him. He eventually gave up and signed up for Lyft. The account never reopened. The asymmetry of information is the core of the problem. Uber knows everything about a driver. It knows every route they've driven, every passenger complaint, every GPS anomaly, every document they've submitted. The algorithmic decision to deactivate comes from that data the driver cannot access, interpreted by logic the driver cannot see, producing a result the driver cannot easily challenge. The driver knows almost nothing about Uber's decision. They know the outcome. They don't know the reasoning. And the reasoning, in cases where the decision was wrong, is the only thing that would allow them to prove it was wrong. This information asymmetry was built into the system by design. Uber's fraud detection logic is proprietary. If drivers knew exactly what triggered a deactivation, they would also know how to game the system, how to make fraudulent documents look legitimate, how to suppress complaint patterns. The opacity serves a purpose. But it also makes wrongful deactivations nearly impossible to contest. Because you cannot challenge a decision you cannot see. Uber eventually implemented changes to its false complaint detection system. It built tools to identify passengers who showed patterns of repeatedly accusing drivers and requesting refunds. If a complaint came from a flagged passenger, the complaint would not be used against the driver. This was progress. It was also an acknowledgement that the original system had been failing drivers in exactly the ways they had described for years. In New York City, where Uber drivers had won the right to be classified as employees for unemployment insurance purposes, drivers had somewhat more leverage. But New York was the exception. Most Uber drivers in most jurisdictions had nothing. In the European Union, the Platform Work Directive, passed in 2024 after years of negotiation, required gig platforms to be more transparent about automated decisions affecting workers, and to provide human review processes for significant decisions like deactivation. The directive passed in a weakened form. Enforcement began slowly. In the United States, no equivalent federal rule exists. A driver in Ohio, in Texas, in California has essentially no legal mechanism to demand an explanation for why an algorithm ended their contract. They can appeal through the app. They can call a customer service number. They can send emails that will be answered by automated systems trained to de-escalate without resolving. What they cannot do, in any legally meaningful sense, is force Uber to explain how its algorithm works, what data it used, or whether it made an error. The structure of the gig economy makes this asymmetry intentional, not accidental. Uber's legal architecture was designed to insulate the company from the obligations of employment law. If Uber's drivers were employees, Uber would owe them minimum wage guarantees, overtime protections, workers' compensation, and the right to appeal termination through established grievance processes. The contractor classification eliminated all of those obligations. What it also eliminated was any accountability mechanism for the algorithm. An employer who fires an employee without cause can be challenged under labor law. A platform that deactivates a contractor based on an algorithmic assessment faces no equivalent standard. The algorithm's output is not a termination. It is a contract non-renewal. And contracts that give one party the right to terminate at any time, for any reason, are difficult to challenge in court regardless of whether the decision was wrong. This is why the European Platform Work Directive matters. It attempts to establish that algorithmic management of workers, regardless of their legal classification, carries obligations. Transparency about decision criteria. Human review before significant decisions. The ability to contest automated outcomes. Whether those obligations survive implementation in diluted form is still being determined. But the direction is clear. The regulatory world is beginning to treat algorithmic management as a form of power that requires accountability. The United States has not moved in that direction at the federal level. A driver deactivated by Uber's fraud detection system in 2025 has fewer rights than a worker fired by a manager in 1975. The system was built that way deliberately. Not out of malice, but out of scale. Uber facilitates 5 billion rides per year. Managing driver relations through individual human decisions at that volume would be impossible. The algorithm isn't a bug. It's how the operation runs. But that framing, scale requires automation, automation requires opacity requires acceptance, describes a trade-off that the drivers never agreed to. They agreed to deliver rides for a commission. They did not agree to be evaluated by a system they couldn't see, terminated by a process they couldn't appeal, for reasons no one at the company could explain. The question the Uber case raises is not whether algorithmic management should exist. At that scale, it has to exist in some form. The question is whether the people subject to it have any rights, any claim to transparency, to explanation, to meaningful appeal, when the algorithm gets it wrong. Uber's algorithm deactivated drivers with 4.9 ratings. Drivers with 10,000 rides. Drivers who had submitted real documents and followed every rule and one day found themselves on the wrong side of a decision they couldn't see, made by a system they couldn't appeal to, for reasons nobody at the company could explain. The platform didn't lose money when this happened. The rides got redistributed. The drivers who were wrongfully deactivated and eventually reinstated mostly went back to driving. Their stories exist in forum threads and subreddits and occasional journalism, and then they disappear. Somewhere right now, a driver is on the road. Their rating is good. Their documents are in order. They have no reason to think tonight will be different from any other night. The system is watching. It's monitoring ratings, complaint patterns, GPS anomalies, document flags, dozens of other signals. It's always watching. And it can always change its mind. If your entire income depends on a system you can't see, making decisions about you that you can't appeal, are you working for a company? Or are you working for a machine that doesn't know your name? If you think more people need to hear this story, share it. And subscribe, because this isn't the last time AI changes someone's life.